Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and the iPhone XS Max has been out for about 1 month now, and I actually haven't done a review video on it. So for this video, I actually wanted to go ahead and give you my review of using it 1 month later. The first thing you gotta talk about with almost any iPhone is the design, and the iPhone XS Max almost looks identical to the iPhone X that it precedes. The only really big difference is the fact that it's bigger. The iPhone XS Max has a 6.5-inch OLED screen with a resolution of 2688 by 1242 with 458 pixels per inch. Apple calls this a Super Retina display. And basically what that means is it's just a really good display. If you've watched my previous videos on the iPhone XR, you would know that pixels per inch on an OLED display have to be higher, and that OLED displays actually have lower subpixel counts, which can create fuzzy text if the PPI isn't actually that high. So if you have a lower resolution on an OLED screen compared to, say, an LCD screen, it's actually not the same, which is why Apple sells higher resolution OLED phones. I think we should tell someone that. The iPhone XS Max does have a really good display though. It is bright, it's vivid, it's OLED, so it has those true deep blacks. iPhones also come with True Tone, which adapts the ambient brightness, and that works the same on the older iPhones and the iPad as well, and it's a welcome addition on the XS Max as well. It's a really good technology. I never turn it off on any iOS device that has it. So what Apple has done with this bigger screen is a little bit of a mixed bag. So for the most part, apps just look the same, except they're bigger. When you go into an application that hasn't really been optimized for it, it just looks bigger. Some apps will show you more information than the regular size 5.8-inch iPhone XS, but for the most part, you're just getting bigger apps, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Having a bigger screen that just shows a bigger part of the app actually does create a more immersive experience, at least from my perspective. One of the new things with the iPhone XS Max as opposed to the regular iPhone XS or iPhone X is that they actually added landscape mode. So whenever you take your iPhone and you rotate it, in certain apps you'll actually get a brand new landscape mode that has multiple columns. And this is something I do not like on the iPhone XS Max. I think a lot of the apps that are using these multiple column views don't look designed correctly. For example, take a look at Messages. This looks like a mess. You have multiple panels everywhere. It almost looks like a software bug, especially with the notch on the left-hand corner pushing the content to the side. It just doesn't look right to me, and almost any app that has a landscape view, I'm just really not a fan of it. I really wish Apple would better optimize the landscape view on a lot of these apps, or do something different. I really don't think this multiple column view is working, and I'd be surprised to hear that people actually use these apps regularly in landscape mode. And on previous Plus models, you could actually rotate the screen, the home screen in landscape. And they actually got rid of that in the iPhone XS Max, which I actually think would be useful, because when you swipe out of an app in landscape mode, you are brought back to the home screen in the wrong orientation. I don't know, I just think it makes a poor experience for using this phone in landscape mode, so I really think either fix landscape mode or just get rid of it completely in the future models. Now, of course, with the iPhone XS Max, you're getting the same exact gestures as you got in the previous iPhone X, and they hold up really well with this bigger screen. It's one of the things I was worried about when I picked up my XS Max, but thankfully using the iPhone XS Max, using all those gestures, it translates really well. I can usually reach most parts of the screen with my phone, or if I do a little shimmy, I call this the iPhone shimmy, where you kind of just move it up and down with your hand. Everything works really well. I can still reach Control Center, I can still get into multitasking view very easily, and I can still use all those swipey gestures that come with the iPhone X, and it feels really, really nice on the big screen. I've often said the iPhone X was the perfect size iPhone with that 5.8 inches and the way it fits in your hand, and you still get a really big screen experience. And I think that is true. I do think the iPhone X is almost the perfect size phone, but I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the compromise made of having a bigger phone and having a bigger screen. The 6.5-inch screen is really enjoyable, even though I technically think the design of the regular iPhone XS and iPhone X is better because it fits better in your hand. I really enjoy having the slightly bigger phone to have more content on it. And I also like how Apple was actually able to make this a little bit smaller than the iPhone 8 Plus while still having a much bigger screen inside of it. So that is a big plus to me. So of course, having that big screen display, one of the first things you're gonna wanna do with it is watch video. And watching video on this is really a dream. Everything looks so good on the screen. The screen gets really bright, brighter than last year's model. It has HDR too, so if you have any HDR content on Netflix or on the iTunes store, you just get a really nice, beautiful picture on the iPhone XS Max. And having that huge screen in your pocket, it just makes the content so immersive. And in my opinion, if you're watching a lot of video, if you watch a lot of YouTube, Netflix, even iTunes movies, I think it's a big reason to go for the bigger screen phone. And stuff like gaming too actually does take really good advantage of this bigger screen. A game that came out recently, Civilization 6 on the iPhone, you would think a game like Civilization wouldn't work well on an iPhone, especially with a smaller screen, but the 6.5-inch iPhone XS Max makes it work so well. So one of the other additions with the new iPhone XS Max is wider stereo sound with the speaker. And what that basically means is it has more balanced sound in the top and the bottom speakers, and they sound really, really good. The iPhone X did sound good, but this just sounds even better. I'm really enjoying the sound on the iPhone XS Max, which usually means that sometimes I can avoid putting in my AirPods or listening to something on the HomePod. Sometimes I'll just play it through my phone speakers and it sounds really good. Now, the only other design difference with this year's iPhone is I actually added an antenna band on the bottom, and actually the ports are asymmetrical now. The little speaker goes on the bottom, those are asymmetrical. With this antenna band, apparently you can now get gigabit LTE, but in my day-to-day use, I really haven't noticed any speed increases. I'm not even sure if AT&T has gigabit LTE in my area. So no real speed differences over networking for me. It's not something I really noticed. But there is an additional antenna band down there, so maybe in the future that will be beneficial, but for now, I'm not really taking any advantage of it. So even though this year's iPhone looks pretty much the same, except having a bigger screen and that antenna band, they do add a bunch of new stuff inside of it. The most prominent thing being a new processor, the A12 Bionic processor. The A12 has a Geekbench score of 4,773 for the single core score and a 10,793 for the multi-core score. Apple says this is about 15% faster than the last year's iPhone X, and I guess that's true. Geekbench would suggest that. Although I think the iPhone X was plenty fast and the iPhone XS Max is just as fast, but now we're getting into spaces where this is rivaling Intel processors, which is really impressive. So just more headroom for this to grow in the future. If you buy an iPhone XS or an iPhone XS Max, you're gonna have a processor that's gonna be speedy for a long time. I don't really notice the 15% faster difference because the iPhone X was plenty fast, but it's really nice just to have that extra headroom. Now, what is more improved is the graphics. They're apparently 50% better than the previous iPhone X. And you might say, well, what's gonna take advantage of those 50% faster graphics? And a game I alluded to earlier, Civilization 6, I think is really taking advantage of these graphics. The game looks really, really good on the iPhone, runs really well, even in the later turn games where normally a Civilization game would slow down with AI processing and taking turns and more units on screen. It's really, really good. I almost thought Civilization 6 wouldn't be playable on the iPhone because of the smaller screen, but on the iPhone XS Max, you get that big screen, you get really good graphics on it, and it's just been a dream to play. So I think those 50% graphics are actually helping out in gaming. For me, I previously haven't played too many games on my iPhone, but I've been enjoying Civilization 6 a lot on the iPhone. I've been playing it so much more than I normally would. Apple also added an additional 1 GB of RAM, so the iPhone XS Max has 4 GB of RAM. I didn't think the iPhone X was bad at managing any sort of RAM limitations, but having another gigabyte, I'm not going to complain. Things have been really smooth on the iPhone XS Max, no random apps shutting down or anything like that. So very thankful for another gigabyte of RAM. If anything, it future-proofs the phone for a little while longer. Apple also added a new neural engine with the processor, which is supposed to help with things like photos. So one of the advantages of this neural engine is you actually get a slider on the iPhone XS and iPhone XS Max when you're doing portrait control, and you can actually control it in real time and control the blurring backgrounds of portrait mode in the photos. It also gives you live previews of the studio lighting in portrait mode. Say you pick stage light mono, you can now actually see that in real time, which you couldn't do on an iPhone X. And apparently that's all thanks to the new neural processing inside of the iPhone XS Max's chip. I've really been enjoying those live previews and stuff like that with the new neural engine. Not sure how much faster it's making other things that it's supposed to do with AI, but it's a welcome addition, and so far I have no complaints. Another new feature because of that neural engine is Face ID is apparently a little bit faster. With my everyday use, I definitely see that it's a little bit faster. It definitely reads my face a little quicker, and I find that it's actually more reliable than it's ever been. I really enjoy using Face ID, and I've recently been using the Pixel 3 XL, which has a fingerprint reader on the back. And I gotta say, after using Face ID for a full year and now using Face ID on the XS Max, it's really hard for me to go back to a fingerprint reader. It's another extra step I have to think of in my brain. Every time I go to use my Pixel 3 XL, I'm going, why is this thing locked? And then it takes me a second to go, oh yeah, you have to put your fingerprint on the back. I would like to see it start working in some different orientations. Maybe if you put it in landscape mode or even upside down, would be cool to see Face ID work in more orientations. So I'd be remiss not to mention iOS 12 and a new iPhone release. This now comes with iOS 12, which was mostly focused on software optimization. And I would say that's mostly true. There aren't too many new features in iOS 12, but everything's been optimized. Everything feels super snappy. So even if you're coming from an older phone, even if you're not planning to upgrade to the XS Max, if you have an iPhone 8, an iPhone 7, an iPhone 6, you're supposed to be getting a lot of improvements. And from things I've been reading on the internet, some personal experience, that has been true. iOS 12 is a nice optimized version of Apple's iOS software. You do get some stuff like some new Memoji, which actually you can make your own avatar now. I did use this feature a lot in the beta and when it first came out, but after using it for a month, I really don't find myself using this feature all too much. Although it is nice to have these new customizable Memoji, and now you can use them in more places like FaceTime, which actually is cool, and I have used that with my little nephews and they seem to enjoy it a lot. So that is a nice feature to have. Another new feature which I'm not really using is the screen time feature. This is part of a digital well-being thing to make you aware of how much you're using your phone. I know I use my phone a lot. It's kind of my job as being a tech reviewer, so I can't really put too much stock in it. I use my phone a lot, I pick it up a lot, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I use my phone for a lot of things, so I really can't give you an accurate review of screen time, but if you do want to limit yourself, you now can, or maybe you have young children, you can actually limit their screen time and you can see how often they're using their phone. iOS 12 actually adds group notifications as well, which a lot of people have been asking for. And yeah, I do enjoy this group notification experience. I get a lot of notifications through YouTube Studio, and now I can leave those on without it completely taking over my phone. And iOS actually gives you now better options to deal with them, so you can snooze notifications, which means you can quietly deliver them to your phone, and I've been using that a lot. So I really do enjoy the enhancements to notifications and just the overall experience of snoozing them, silencing them, managing them better. Apple's done a really good job of this with iOS 12. Another change to iOS 12 is Siri suggestions, and I really haven't found these to be all too helpful. I noticed that it pops up a lot of things that I don't want at a time, especially with like messaging someone, and even though I just sent a message to someone, maybe I don't want to do it right away. So I do hope that Apple can improve this. I like the idea of them, but I hope they would just be a little bit smarter, a little more aware of what I actually wanted to do on my phone instead of giving me shortcuts to things I don't want. Now, along with Siri suggestions also come Siri shortcuts, which is actually really useful. This means that you can basically get Siri to do almost anything you want to do with voice control in terms of automation on your iPhone. So for example, say I wanted to go to bed, I could say, hey S word, and then we could turn off the lights, put an alarm on, maybe lock the door, and all that stuff is easily automated with one simple command that you could set up in Siri. The only problem I have with Siri shortcuts is that it is actually really complex to use. You can even do some light coding in it, and that's just stuff that's not on my level. So while I do appreciate Siri shortcuts being there, there's definitely a big learning curve. If you are new to this, there are some Siri suggestions you can download already that are preset, but I do find it's better if you kind of customize them to your use case. But again, it is kind of hard to get into, so I don't blame you if you're not too thrilled about the feature. Even myself, I want to dive deeper and dig deeper into these Siri shortcuts. I think they can be even more powerful than I'm making them out to be, but I know it's going to be a time commitment to kind of learn how to really customize these features. Battery life has also been good on the XS Max. I have a pretty abnormal use case where I'm watching a lot of video, listening to a lot of audio throughout the day, so my battery is usually hit pretty hard, but I can get through a whole day using the XS Max, no problem. Especially on a normal use case day where I'm not constantly watching video, the XS Max gets really, really good battery life. I'd say about 12 hours is my average for the iPhone XS Max's battery life. Again, depending on what you're doing, maybe if you're playing a lot of gaming, maybe you're watching tons of YouTube, maybe you'll get lower than that. but the battery life on here is definitely good. The only thing I would say that's bad about the battery is that Apple still includes a 5-watt charger in the box. I really thought, especially with the XS Max, that Apple would maybe include a 10-watt charger or an 18-watt fast charger. Unfortunately, they do not include that in the box, so hopefully next year they include it. Apple also made wireless charging a little faster. They say it'll charge about 30 minutes faster. It's really hard to notice 30 minutes faster on wireless charging, but I'll take their word for it. I do usually wirelessly charge my iPhone, so having a faster wireless charging is nice, although, again, I really don't notice it because I usually charge my phone overnight. So one of the most important features on a smartphone is now the camera, and the iPhone XS Max does bring some nice upgrades from the iPhone X camera. So Apple has a new feature called Smart HDR on its iPhone XS Max camera, and what that basically does is it merges normal exposed images, underexposed images, and overexposed images together to give you more dynamic range in your photos. I found the XS Max camera compared to the iPhone X camera last year to be way better at dynamic range, particularly in capturing images of the sky. Normally where the iPhone X might be a little blown out, might be a little white in the sky, I've noticed that the iPhone XS Max takes really good pictures and the sky is almost pure blue, like the blue you see in real life when you take that picture, and it doesn't overexpose the image on the bottom. If you're focusing on the sky, it just does a really good job giving you a really nice blend of dynamic range, especially in harder, challenging light sequences. I mentioned this earlier, but I also like the depth slider that they added. It's really nice to have that ability to control the depth of the photo. The iPhone XS Max also has a dual camera system, which means you get a 2x zoom lens. And that is a really nice feature to have, especially when you have some subjects that are a little shy. It allows you to get a farther away shot while not necessarily moving closer to it. So it is really nice for capturing faraway subjects. Now, video on the iPhone XS Max has actually been really good. It's something it doesn't get enough credit for. The iPhone XS Max camera gives you the ability to record 4K, 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or even 60 frames per second if you want high frame rate 4K video. The camera does a really good job capturing the scene and even has some pretty good low light performance. And now, in addition to a great picture on the XS Max camera, you actually get stereo sound, which is a brand new feature, and it sounds really good. To kind of give you the ultimate video clip, I took this video clip in the rain. I want you to listen to the rain. If you're wearing headphones especially, you can really make use of that stereo sound as the car is passing by. And you hear the rain dropping and the way it's dropping on each thing, and you can kind of get a really good picture of the stereo sound and the quality coming out of the iPhone XS Max's camera. So again, if you're taking a lot of video on your phone, the XS Max camera does a great job, and I'm really enjoying stereo sound. Okay, what about the front-facing camera? There's been a lot of controversy about this with Beautygate, or as we now know, it's actually a bug in iOS, and in iOS 12.1, apparently they're gonna be fixing this. But unfortunately, while I'm doing this review, apparently this isn't fixed. Now, apparently with the front-facing camera, what's happening is sometimes the camera is picking a long exposure frame as opposed to a frame with more detail, a crisper frame. And the reason it's doing this is something with the software where the XS has rear camera stabilization and the front camera is only software stabilization. It actually doesn't have optical image stabilization in the front part of the camera. So that's why I think some shots are looking good and some shots are looking overly smoothed, or what people are referring to as Beautygate. I have noticed it in a few of my photos, but not all of my photos with the front-facing camera. I do think overall the front-facing camera takes some pretty good pictures, but I do want to wait until iOS 12.1 to kind of give you an example of more of these pictures. I think I'll definitely do a follow-up when 12.1 comes out with the old style pictures and maybe the new style pictures to give you a better idea, but I do think they're good pictures still, even with that bug. But again, if you're concerned about any sort of smoothing, Apple said they will be fixing this with iOS 12.1. Okay, so this has probably been another long review. I apologize for that, but if you made it all the way through, thank you. You probably want to know, is the iPhone XS Max worth buying? And I'm gonna have some mixed answers for you. There's 3 answers I'm gonna give you. Number 1, should you buy? if you want the best iPhone you can get with the biggest possible screen, with an OLED screen with 2 cameras on the back, so you could do a regular camera and a zoom camera, the iPhone XS Max is a great phone. But it is expensive. Starting at $1,099, it's an expensive phone. So that's probably the biggest con it really has going for it. It's just a pricey phone. If you don't have $1,099 to spend, maybe don't consider getting it, especially with 64 gigabyte space storage. And you know already that with the 512 gigabyte option, you're almost spending $1,500 on your phone. However, most people now pay through their phones through monthly plans, and maybe that's only a $5 or $6 increase a month. And maybe that's worth it to you. It is to me. When I got the XS Max, I always like getting the latest and greatest iPhones. It's why I run a tech channel, and getting the iPhone XS Max was worth it to me, and I've been really enjoying using it. So yes, if you want a new iPhone and you want the latest, greatest, best iPhone with the biggest possible screen, the XS Max is definitely worth it. It's a great phone. My second answer is, should you upgrade? Well, if you're coming from an iPhone 10, maybe you shouldn't upgrade. The iPhone 10 is a great phone still, and I don't think there's enough improvements in this to warrant spending another $1,099 for an upgrade. That being said, say you're coming from an iPhone 6, an iPhone 6 Plus, 6S, 7, maybe even an iPhone 8, although maybe I would caution that as well. But if you're coming from an older phone, this is definitely worth the upgrade. Now, the third option is for those people waiting for the iPhone XR. This video is going up literally a day before the iPhone XR is released. And you know my opinions on the iPhone XR, and you know that I think it's gonna probably be the phone to get for most people. And if you don't want to spend the extra money on an iPhone XS Max, you don't want the biggest screen, you don't care about the OLED screen, you don't care about having a second zoom camera, I really think you should consider the iPhone XR. It's gonna have a screen that's in between the iPhone X and iPhone XS Max at 6.1 inches. It's gonna have an LCD display, but I do think it's going to be okay. I don't think it's gonna be a bad display by any means of the word. And the starting price is $750, which is a lot easier to swallow than $1,099. So I think for most people out there, you should probably wait for the XR reviews to come out, and maybe you'll wanna watch mine and see what I think of it. But again, some people simply want the best phone possible, and some people really value a giant screen size. And people do value an OLED screen or the second camera, so maybe you'll want to go with the XS Max. And again, like I said, it's an expensive phone, but it's a really, really good phone. Okay guys, thanks for watching the video. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a like. If you want to subscribe to my channel to see more, make sure you're subscribed. And again, we're gonna have the iPhone XR videos be coming out pretty soon, so if you're interested in that, make sure you check out those videos. And as always guys, I will see you all in the next video. Take care everyone.